Hi there, and welcome to Vegan Island Radio, the show that's dedicated to artists, activists and everyday people who are doing their bit to encourage others and bring about a vegan planet in their own special way. Today on the proverbial Vegan Island I have with me Reuben Skeats. Reuben is an animal rights activist who considers himself super new to veganism at just 2.5 years in, but feels that he has experienced so many changes in that time it could easily have been much longer. He does outreach with We the Free and other grassroots activism in and around Bath and Bristol. He currently works for PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, as their UK antivivisection campaign leader. Reuben also went into anaphylactic shock in Birmingham New Street Station due to a nut allergy and was rescued by 2 paramedics from an ambulance TV programme.
They feel no different than us in what they want for their lives. Leave them alone to live in peace. No need to give them such strife. Think about being in their position. Use your mind, heart and intuition. You surely won't want it for yourselves. So stop doing it to someone else. Blood all around, brothers and sisters on the ground. No escape for me. Is this the end? Why is no one coming to save me? Why are they doing this to me? Never did anything wrong. In prison since I was born. Can't you see how much pain you cause? Atrocities against their will. No need to feed on stolen lives. Vegans are living proof of this. No need for any bloodshed. No need for any rape and abuse. All we need is provided in full. No screaming sauces or merciful.
But I love animals.
No, you don't.
Lions eat flesh.
So what?
Desert island.
Grocery shopping city dweller.
Canine thief.
Not sharp enough.
Since caveman days.
How long? Still wrong.
Personal choice.
First bears. Save the animals, the planet.
I don't care. Cruelty and pain given to us again and again. Drag us to our death. We're no different from your best. Veganism will cause the change. Make eating us become what is strange. All animals should be free from evil intentions and captivity. Change what is normal in society. No more of this insanity. There's no need to fund this abuse. No real reason, no solid excuse. What they are put through is such a shame. You would never tolerate the same. You stand up for all sorts of rights, yet pay to kill all these innocents. How do you sleep at night? For the animals I'll keep singing. As long as you keep killing, as long as you keep paying to steal their lives from them. Veganism is the peaceful way.
Go vegan.
to rectify what is so wrong.
Go vegan now.
Overdue, needed so long.
Let all animals be free.
Go vegan now. Go vegan now. Go vegan now. Go vegan now.
Good to see you, Reuben, and welcome to the island.
Alan, thank you for having me here.
You're very, very welcome. It's lovely to see you. So, tell me all about the anaphylactic shock. Were these were the paramedics real paramedics doing a TV show, or were they just actors?
No, they were real paramedics. They didn't send in actors to help me. Unfortunately, they weren't filming at the time, so no one gets the joy of seeing me going into anaphylactic shock. But I'd been at a conference in Birmingham. I was still at university at the time. And all of the food had been things that you might think would have nuts in, but they'd specifically put a sign on it that said no nuts. So I thought, oh, that's quite good. It must be, like an intentional thing that they've done to, they've made all of the dishes without nuts. And later on, there were some people carrying around platters. This was in my pre-vegan days. It was chicken satay. As someone who's always had a nut allergy, I wasn't aware that satay was nuts because I've never had it. So I ate it and thought, like, crikey, that's really spicy. Turned out it wasn't meant to be spicy. So I went away from the conference. We were heading to the train station to go back to where we were at university in Aberystwyth. And I got on the train and I started to think, no, this definitely isn't normal. I still feel awful about half an hour after eating that. And so I quickly hopped off the train before it left. And then we got the first aiders. And luckily the ambulance got there really quick because the first aiders told me the last time it had taken about 2 hours. So I had the joys of going into anaphylactic shock on the train platform with everyone kind of slowly walking past and watching. But yeah, so it was an experience.
So how did yeah, that is definitely an experience. How did the film crew? Were those paramedics just were they close by because they happened to be filming something, or?
Well, they said they weren't actually filming that day, but they are the paramedics who are always on, the ambulance paramedic response TV show. So I think they were just doing their normal job that day. But they said if I'd chosen to eat nuts a day earlier, I could have got my 15 minutes of fame. We were filming the day before.
I'm not quite sure that that's the way you want your 15 minutes of fame to be.
I didn't look too good. I was quite swollen up, so.
How did you discover that you actually had a nut allergy? How do you discover something like that without it being, I don't know, fatal?
Well, quite. You discover it the hard way, or at least that was how it happened for me. So I think I don't remember it because I think it was about 2. And I think maybe my parents had given me like maybe peanut butter or something like that. And then I got covered in a rash. And they called they weren't a really common thing when I was a lot younger. So they called up a friend of ours who was a doctor, and he said, "Has he eaten anything?" And they said, "Yeah, he just did some peanut butter." And he said, "Call an ambulance now. You need to get into the hospital." I mean, luckily now as an adult, because I've always had it, I carry medication with me in case it does happen. Obviously, as a baby, I didn't have that because we didn't know I had an allergy, so they had to kind of rush me to the hospital. And I think the last time it happened, my mum actually got to the hospital before the ambulance did. So maybe I might be better off calling her.
Yeah, especially with the state of the NHS at the moment. Not that it's the NHS's fault, obviously. They're doing a cracking job.
Yeah.
So how did you find yourself moving into the vegan lifestyle or the philosophy?
Yeah, so my partner had been vegetarian for a couple of years, and so I think I must have been a bit of a slow learner, because I didn't feel super persuaded just by that. But what I did start doing was I started replacing the foods that I found I could easily replace, and so I replaced chicken with corn or whatever. And eventually I reached a point where I found, wow, I'm pretty much not eating any animal products. So it was almost, at first I at least went vegetarian almost out of convenience because it just became so easy. I'd replaced everything that I used to like. And then when it came to veganism, making that leap from vegetarian to vegan, I guess I kind of decided, I think we watched Earthlings, so kind of the usual route into veganism, watch a horrible film full of animal suffering. And that introduced me to veganism. And then my partner and I, we both started reading an awful lot, loads of books around that time. And that was what moved it from just being vegan and choosing not to harm animals to kind of starting to understand the deeper philosophy behind it, and feeling like an obligation to do more than just not harming them ourselves, but to be pushing for a world where no one is abusing their rights.
Yeah, it's quite an important mental step to take, isn't it? It's very easy to just maintain it as a diet and not really put too much thought into it. And it's I find the more people I talk to that are active, it's once you make those connections, it's very difficult to not become active.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've found it just feels like an obligation every time there's some kind of activism being organised, or I've got a window to be doing something. It feels like an obligation that okay, well, I have to be there because the small sacrifice of my time is nothing compared to the change that we're trying to bring about and the harm we're trying to stop being caused to others. So yeah, it just feels like an obligation. Really, it feels like you kind of have to once you make that kind of philosophical leap.
So you were saying that you've done some outreach with We the Free. I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on your experiences with them and what kind of outreach that you've been doing, that you do with them, because I know they do different sorts and they've changed their tactics, etc. over time.
Yeah, so we've done a couple of different things. It mostly kind of operates on a kind of standard idea of speaking to general members of the public. We do it in Bristol and Bath, normally about twice a month. My experiences have been pretty much entirely positive. Every time I go, I at least have 3 to 4 really good conversations with people where you really feel like they've gone away with, at minimum, a seed planted. And then the different kind of formats we've followed. More recently in Bristol and Bath, We the Free, they've been doing a 3-minute video challenge. And it's all kind of themed with kind of matrix style. So we're asking people whether they want to take the blue pill or the red pill. The blue pill being going about their evening or day and not hearing about a slightly disturbing truth that we are trying to tell them about. Or they can choose to take the red pill and then they watch the video. And it's quite empowering for people to make the decision to find out about it themselves. And then you kind of lose a lot of the people who often, with outreach events, will just walk past your screen and hurl abuse, because everyone who's trying it has chosen to. So the only person they can be annoyed at if they see this footage is them, because we've not made anyone see it. But yeah, so we found that it's improved the quality of the conversations we have. But yeah, so that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, and you're also so you're now campaign manager, is that the right word? Or you're in charge of the antivivisection campaigning for PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. How did you fall into that one?
Yeah, so I think the title is antivivisection campaign leader. So I kind of take the lead on UK campaigning to do with animal testing. I knew before almost as soon as I went vegan, I kind of knew that I wanted to find a way to dedicate as much time to this as possible. And I couldn't think of a better way to do that than my 9 to 5, 5 days a week, sometimes 6, sometimes 7, doing animal rights work, right? And so obviously I applied for it, and was lucky enough to get a role doing a job that I love and is really fulfilling. And knowing that every morning when I wake up, my job for today is ending animal tests.
So would you like to tell me a bit about animal testing? There will be a lot of people that feel that it doesn't really happen that much, that there's a lot of medical benefits, because either you're told nothing or you're told that it's a worthy thing to be happening, and it's a necessary thing to be happening. If you don't, so I don't know if you'd like to add a few answers or a few opinions on that.
Yeah. So I think people not knowing very much about it is by design. I think the agents working behind this know that if the general public were completely clued up on what was going on behind the doors of a laboratory, they wouldn't be allowed to keep doing it. So they really thrive on people not knowing. But it is huge. I think the stats just came out recently. It was something like 2.7 million animals tested on last year. That can be mice, rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, dogs, primates, pretty much any animal that isn't like a great ape, so chimp, orangutan, and that's in the UK context. They can include any number of different tests that if some kind of random member of the public was doing, they'd get locked up, but if it happens behind closed doors, it's protected and kept secret. The primary campaign that I work on is called the Forced Swim Test. So that is mostly taking place at the University of Bristol, hence I'm so active in this area. And that involves a rat or mouse being dropped into an inescapable cylinder of cold water and being left to struggle for up to 15 minutes. Once they're done struggling, they'll remove them and decapitate them. And this has been, I think the researcher behind this it dates back to like 1998, so about 25 years. And that's happening almost every year. Half of these tests are being reproduced, the same test over and over again. And then to people who feel like it's producing like some kind of life-saving drug or producing huge benefits, at least using this research, for example, in 25 years, they haven't produced a single therapy or treatment based off of this. And at least in the American context, I think the stat is something like 92% of drugs that pass animal tests, so that from the animal tests, we have every reason to think they would work in humans. 92% of the time, they then fail in humans. So the idea that they're like some kind of magic elixir for finding treatments for humans just isn't realistic.
No. No, and quite a lot of campaigning. There's quite a few major charities that spend an awful lot of time promoting the goodness that they do, which clearly they do a lot of good in various aspects and various ways. They also rely on animal testing and fail to mention that to the public. I feel that's obviously on purpose because a lot of the public are not keen on the idea.
Yeah, as I said, they really don't want people to know about this. In the charities context, I think if people knew what they were doing to these animals, you would cease to receive donations, right? Like, for instance, if there were a charity supporting the forced swim test, if your patrons believed that you were dropping rats into beaks of water for the last 25 years, why would the general public want to support you? And there are tests like that charities are supporting, funding all the time.
So as we move into a more modern world, is there any validity in animal testing? I imagine, are there alternatives? What are the alternatives?
Yeah, there's not really. You can't really claim validity to animal testing and it be moral at the same time, because the idea that animal testing is valid for humans relies on the idea that the animal is therefore similar to a human. And so, for whatever reason you wouldn't do that test to a human, if the animal is similar to us, if they're the same as us, you therefore morally shouldn't do it to them either, right? Like if you want to study pain, for instance, and you use a mouse to understand pain in a human, you're relying on the idea that that mouse experiences pain the way you do. So the reason that they consider it unethical to do these experiments on humans is the exact reason it therefore has to be unethical to do it on another animal as well. And in terms of the validity, we're hearing all of the time about how invalid they turn out to be for humans. Like there was a group of scientists who spent a decade researching, trying to replicate the most landmark cancer studies in animals. They spent a full decade doing this. They released a paper in 2012, and they found that they couldn't replicate 47 out of the 53 studies they did. So if they can't replicate these studies that are done on rats in other rats, the idea that they can therefore like replicate them in humans is ludicrous. So yeah, it's not working, and that's been recognized by numerous people. But there are other methods we can use. You know, we've got like they can grow like they call them organoids from stem cells, which is essentially creating like human organs. So it's tailored to humans, or you can use computer simulations to try and understand our response, how the human body would respond to drugs. And they have found that these methods often have a much higher success rate than using animal models. So for instance, in predicting like which drugs will cause heart problems, they found that computer simulations are much more effective at predicting that than animal models. Or they found that with they did a study on animal drugs that passed animal experiments but then caused liver damage in humans. They found that a organ on a chip could flag the drugs that damaged organs 87% of the time, whilst animal tests were failing. So there's lots of methods that are not just conserve as alternatives, but can work much better because they're created to match humans, which obviously other animals aren't. You know, they have their own responses to different chemicals.
So with your experience of campaigning and talking to people, do you think that the end is in sight? Do you think that there's a way of moving this forward so that it is ended?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely progress happening, and it's entirely reasonable to think that we can do away with this, this type of research, essentially. For instance, in the US last year, I mean, it's not a step to outright banning it, but they produced a new act or a new law at the tail end of last year that finally got rid of animal testing mandates for drugs. So it allowed, before it was mandatory to test drugs on animals. Following that, it then became that you could use a computer model or an organ on a chip or cells in a petri dish instead, if you can prove that they are a good way of measuring an animal's response, a human's response. So progress is happening. There's progress happening in Europe as well. The Netherlands, for instance, have made very big steps towards ending animal testing. They can go further and finally produce their roadmap to ending it. But there is huge progress happening, and there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. But that doesn't mean we let up. That means we go harder now than ever. Because we've got to keep pushing to get it over the line. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm sure you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. We brought back extended animal testing. I think that was for cosmetics, and was that just pretty much overturned as soon as it was announced? It felt like that was the case.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite that they'd brought it back. It was more that it had been going on almost potentially since it was first made illegal, under the guise of, rather than it being for the consumer's safety, being for the employees' safety, so the people working in the factory dealing with the cosmetics. They essentially, a court case ruled, I think, that they could continue to do that. There was their massive public outcry, and suddenly they decided that they weren't going to do that. And so it shows that one minute, they'll say it's completely necessary for us to do this, and then when there's enough public support for them to not do it, suddenly they find a way to not do it. And so it is an instance of mass public opposition to something having really quite a huge effect. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the power of the collective. It's interesting, like you say, you hear so often the fact that there is no alternative, that it is imperative. and then something like this comes along, and enough people do put up a stink about it, and suddenly it's actually we can get around that. We can do it a different way. I presume. I mean, I've felt for a long time that the vivisection. Obviously, there's a lot of money in it, and it's not just from the drug companies themselves. There's the people that make the cages and the people that provide the animals, and all the services around that. I mean, is it quite a big industry behind the scenes, not just the end product, which is which is where everybody focuses.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge industry. There's people making money out of producing new strains of animals that can exhibit certain symptoms that maybe a researcher wants to study. There's huge money in, often in many countries, animals are being shipped. Monkeys are being taken from the wild and shipped to be sold to laboratories. It's a huge industry, and there's a lot of vested interest in this not going away. And then in terms of the individual researchers, if you take the Force Swim Test campaign that I work on quite a lot, for instance, if you've dedicated, 25 years of your life to researching something and receiving grant money to do that, to accept that what you've been doing has produced, zero benefit for anyone and has produced huge harms for the individuals you've experimented on. It really goes against your vested interests and your capacity to keep being, a respected researcher and continue to make money out of your job. If you accept that that is the case, so there's huge vested interest in individuals and corporations continuing with this model. And so that's obviously why we need huge public opposition to it continuing.
Are there instances of individual researchers themselves that have suddenly thought, "My God, what I'm doing is a really bad thing, and I need to stop and tell other people"? Or is that not a thing?
Well, there are instances of individuals who have worked in animal laboratories who realise how horrendous what they've done is, and lots of people to get their PhD often have to end up testing on animals. There's one example I can think of. A journalist who had worked in a laboratory wrote an article about a monkey who he'd worked with. So he had gone away for 8 years by this point. He hadn't worked in the laboratory for 8 years. He'd become a journalist. And he wrote about a monkey named Clayton, who he'd worked with. He went back to the laboratory 8 years on to do the story. And he wrote quite sadly about how when he went back, the baby monkey that he'd held in his arms eight years ago was now fully grown. They would hide at the back of their cage. They would no longer want to come to the front to see them. When he turned up, Clayton would, bare his teeth at him, tell him to go away. Essentially, he'd been through numerous surgeries through this time. And the journalist wrote about how in those 8 years he'd moved across the country twice. He'd started different jobs. For that entire time, Clayton had spent every day staring at those bars around him and being taken out every day for numerous operations or exercises to be done with him. And so there are there's plenty of people who are speaking about this, who have been involved in these industries in the past and have kind of realised what a flawed approach they are. I think even the former director of the National Institutes of Health in the US, Francis Collins, said that preclinical research, and particularly animal models, are currently most susceptible to issues with reproducing results. So that's the head of their, one of their main funding bodies, often for animal testing, who's saying, in terms of difficulty replicating scientific results, which is, one of the bedrocks of producing new information and scientific advancement, one of the most flawed areas for reproducibility is animal testing. There's plenty of people who have been involved in this that are now comfortable critiquing it.
I didn't actually mention in your introduction, but you're currently making a film. I mean, I think you're most of the way through making a film, A Nation of Animal Lovers, which is hopefully, if all goes well for you, available at the end of this year. I'd be very interested to know the backstory and then obviously the content and context of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. So It's a film that my partner and I are making. She studied film at university, so she's been the main driver on the technical side, because at least at the start, I didn't understand any of that. I think we naively, when we first started, thought, oh, we can smash out a feature-length film in no time, just the two of us, and have since found it takes a really, really long time to do. But essentially it spawned from, I think a lot of people get this when they first go vegan. There was a lot of frustration with like the inability to articulate quite what it was we wanted people to do, and to articulate ourselves well to persuade other people to go vegan, particularly those close around us. And we thought, what skills do we have that could assist us with putting the message out there in the way that suits us? And so we thought, we'll make a film about it. So it's in a similar vein to kind of similar films, so like kind of Dominion, Land of Hope and Glory, Earthlings, that kind of vein of films, so a lot of quite graphic imagery. But we also wanted to focus on some of the other industries, so it talks about greyhound racing as well, so not just how we exploit animals for food, and then it even goes down to the importance of insects morally, their individuality towards the end of the film. So we really wanted to cover all bases with the film, which hopefully, if it should be out by the end of the year, all goes according to plan.
So is that all shot in this country? Are you using footage from other places?
Yeah. Well, we've tried to keep it as much in the UK as possible, because we want it to be as relevant as possible to a UK audience. Again, like with animal testing in animal agriculture, there is great interest in what goes on behind those doors not being seen. So sometimes footage of a certain practice or something like that is only available filmed in another country. And so where we've had limited other option, we've used footage from other countries. And then the other thing we've tried to use where we can is footage that has been released by farmers or by the animal agriculture industry, because it becomes very difficult to accuse us of cherry picking specifically bad footage when it's them who have actually chosen to release it.
Yeah, if it's their own footage, it's very, very hard to pretend it wasn't you.
Yeah.
Fat and docile, big and dumb, they look so stupid, they aren't much fun. Cows aren't fun. They eat to grow, grow to die, die to be et at the hamburger fry. Cows well done. Nobody thunk it, nobody knew, no one imagined the great cow guru. Cows are one. He hid in the forest, read books with great zeal. He loved Che Guevara, a revolutionary veal. Cows say tongue. He spoke about justice, but nobody stirred. He felt like an outcast, alone in the herd. Cow doll drums. He moved, we must fight, escape or we'll die. Cows gathered around, 'cause the stakes were so high. Bad cow pun. But then he was captured, stuffed into a crate, loaded onto a truck where he rode to his fate. Cows are bummed. He was a scrawny calf who looked rather woozy. No one suspected he was packing an Uzi. Cows with guns. They came with a needle to stick in his thigh. He kicked for the groin, he pissed in their eye. Cow well hung. Knocked over a tractor and ran for the door. 6 gallons of gas flowed out on the floor. Run, cows, run. He picked up a bullhorn and jumped up on the hay. We are free-roving bovines. We run free. today. We will fight for bovine freedom and hold our large heads high. We will run free with the buffalo or die. Cows with guns. They crashed the gate in a great stampede, tipped over milk truck, torched all the feed. Cows have fun. 60 police cars were piled in a heap, covered in cow pies, covered up deep. Much cow dung. Black smoke rising, darkening the day. 12 burning McDonald's, have it your way. We will fight for bovine freedom and hold our large heads high. We will run free with the buffalo or die. Cows with guns. The president said, enough is enough. These uppity cattle, it's time to get tough. Cow dung flung. The newspapers gloated, folks sighed with relief. Tomorrow at noon they would all be ground beef. Cows on buns. The cows were surrounded, they waited and prayed. They mooed their last moos, they chewed their last hay. Cows outgunned. The order was given to turn cows to whoppers, enforced by the might of 10,000 coppers. But on the horizon, surrounding the shoppers, came the deafening roar of chickens in choppers. We will fight for bovine freedom and hold our large heads high. We will run free with the buffalo or die. Cows with guns.
Now, unlike some other islands out there, we want you to have some things that are actually worth having for survival. So we give you a complete botanical encyclopedia which will enable you to forage for all of the plants available to eat across the globe, and of course a boat, in order for you to venture away from the island and continue your journey into the ocean of opportunity for self-development and vegan outreach. You also get to take one book, one website address that you can recommend to fellow travellers, and your own personal must-have vegan item in order to keep your spirits up and strengthen your resolve. So, firstly, what book would you like to take with you on your journey, and why?
So I picked, it was a book that really interested me when I first, went vegan, called Created from Animals, The Moral Implications of Darwinism, by a philosopher called James Rachels. And I think it's a really useful book to help people understand where we're coming from and to persuade them to adopt a lifestyle that respects the rights of other animals, because it starts from a common ground that most people can accept. So it's predicated on the idea of evolution, and that if you believe in evolution, you therefore have to accept that humans aren't just this special category of animal that is completely far removed from all of the others. We've all followed, we've all basically adapted to our environments through natural selection. And so Darwin proposed that the differences between animals were not differences of kind, they were differences of degree. And so I think once you have that common ground that is based in reality, not opinion, it's just a fact that kind of evolution is how we've arrived at where we are. So you've got the common ground with the person who you're offering this book to. And then the implications of that, if you believe in equality for humans, which most people, I believe, do, means that if you believe in evolution, if our attributes aren't special, you then have to extend those rights to other animals as well.
Yeah, which is quite an important thing, isn't it? I mean, as you hit on at the beginning of that, is the fact that we do, as a species, seem to think of ourselves as separate from, and not actually part of the animal kingdom and part of, the wider nature itself. You often hear people saying they're going to go and take some time in nature without actually realising they're part of it already.
Yeah, 100%.
How did you come across the book in the first place? Where did that come from?
Well, I think I saw it. I read Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, and I think it was one of the books referenced in there. I can't remember what it is that Peter Singer refers to in the book where he references it, but I know that the line caught my eye, and I thought that's quite interesting. I find evolution quite interesting anyway. I like when looking at like behaviors that humans often do that may seem slightly weird, looking at what would have been, why do we do that? What would have been the purpose, when we're in kind of a race to survive, essentially. Survival of the fittest. Why did we produce this attribute? And so it caught my eye, and then I started reading, and I couldn't put it down. So.
So you also get to take a website with you that you can recommend to other people. Obviously, the purpose of that is so that you can inspire others to investigate veganism for themselves and understand the philosophy and the approach, and hopefully create a vegan world faster with information that they can gather at their own speed and in their own time while you're not actually there. What website would you like to recommend to people?
I would probably recommend Ed Winters' YouTube channel, also known as Earthling Ed. I think for anyone who in their head feels they've argued with veganism and have settled the issue, I think they will find that almost any argument they've offered, someone has already offered to him in one of his videos, and he has deconstructed it. And so I think any of them kind of rationalizations that anyone has created, they'll find is swiftly taken apart if they watch enough of his channel for long enough. And yeah, I think he's very good at conveying and articulating arguments that often many of us would struggle to articulate quite as well. And so, yeah, I think it's a really good resource to help people to understand why a lot of the things they use to justify their abuse of animals is essentially predicated on like off-the-cuff rationalizations that they've never really thought through.
I also personally feel like he's improved a lot. His debating skills have obviously, as with most things, if you practice them more, I think his debating skills have got a lot more refined as the time's gone on.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's been doing it long enough, and he's got I guess the right aptitude for becoming good at that kind of thing. He's patient and isn't easily flared by people or provoked. He tends to keep a kind of level head and really reads into what it is they're trying to say so that you can actually deconstruct what the actual point of what they're saying is. So I think they're really useful attributes to have, and I guess over the years he's honed his craft.
Yeah, and he seems very polite and pleased to have the company of people to debate and to talk to, which I feel comes across really well.
Yeah, I think definitely the setting he's trying to work in, the type of activism he's trying to do, they're extremely useful attributes to have. If your activism is like a discussion type format, you want other people to feel like you value them being there, right? There's no point someone turning up and you immediately being angry at them because they're probably not going to get persuaded by anything you have to say.
So finally, when you leave the island on your travels, obviously there's always something of a must-have vegan item that would if you had the option you'd prefer not to be without. So I always like to ask, what would be that one vegan item that you'd prefer not to be without on your travels?
Well, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure, and I find most days, or at least once every 2 days or so, I find I would rather not be without it. It's chocolate milk, like obviously oat or soy milk. So I find Alpro, Oatly, or I discovered the other day M&S have a really good one as well. So any of those three, I find I get a real hankering for. So it would probably be chocolate milk.
So is that exclusively cold, or do you like a hot chocolate as well, or doesn't it really matter?
Probably doesn't matter too much. I do tend to have it cold, but I am partial to a hot chocolate as well. So either one would do.
So now all that remains for us to do is for me to thank you again for coming and visiting me on the island, and for you to climb aboard your wonderfully crafted vessel and sail off into the sunset to continue your journey towards a fully vegan planet. Thanks once again to Reuben Skeats. All the links to find him are in the description. And as Reuben sails away on their brand new adventure, I'd just like to say a special thank you to Dana Lyons, Ethereal UK and Rahil Babooram for providing today's music. Links for all of them are in the description. That's all for now on Vegan Island Radio. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a comment if you wish. And if you'd like to help maintain the island, then why not check out our Patreon link and see what you can do to help out. Thanks once again for tuning in, and come and join us next Sunday and find out who else will wash up upon our shores.
Still
The ARC Experience. Hello, Reuben.
Hello, Ark.
Are you ready for your questions?
Yeah, I am indeed. Thank you.
Have you ever swum naked in a lake?
I have not, so I've not got a very interesting answer for that question. No, I haven't.
What was the last song that you listened to?
I was listening to it just before I spoke with you. So, Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits.
What do you have with pancakes?
What do I have for pancakes? Oh, I have them right. So, with lemon juice and sugar, as they should be.
Bees or wasps?
I mean, I do feel like wasps probably get an inordinate amount of dislike, but I will have to go with bees, just because I find them quite cute, to be honest. So, yeah, bees, I think.
Why do you think the UK government won't promote plant-based eating, considering how urgently we need a transition?
That's a question you could spend a while on. I think there's a lot of vested interests. I think the majority of the population aren't currently in support of it, and they just want to do whatever they can to get re-elected, rather than necessarily doing what would be ideal for policy. I think the people within our government and within the House of Commons themselves mostly want to continue eating animal products and would rather be selfish than protect our future. That's just a few things I could rattle off, but I'm sure there's innumerable reasons that they're corruptly avoiding protecting our future in favour of eating and abusing animals just because they want to.
But what about canines?
Oh, our favourite question. Well, I would say whether canines implied we naturally ate meat anyway, I don't think nature is a particularly good justification for what we should do now if we can avoid it. And I think the argument that canines are clear proof that we need to eat meat is quite weak. I was thinking yesterday about our nails and how they're only really ideal for like opening fruit, like bananas and oranges. So my response might be, but nails rather than claws, because I don't think they'd do much to rip open anyone's flesh. So.
Have you ever played the lottery?
I haven't actually, no. So another really boring one. No, I've always felt that I'd just be paying into someone else's pocket and getting nothing. But you do have to be in it to win it. So if my friend buys a ticket and wins, and I say, "Oh, I never bought one," I might still get a bit annoyed with myself for not just buying that one time. So, but yeah, no, I haven't bought one, and I probably don't plan to either.
What do you think about eating insects?
I mean, I think that's completely unacceptable as well. We've got a perfectly good alternative to eating animals, which is eating plants. I don't know why, as humans, we feel so much desperation to find a way that we can continue to eat someone else who has a life and who has their own interests. Darwin actually wrote about actually did research himself on worms and the special qualities that they have, and he believed that they had intelligence. So I don't know why we're so addicted to this idea that we can only enjoy food if we need to harm someone for it. So no, I think it's completely unacceptable to eat insects. That's their only chance that they have at a life the same way we do. So why not just eat plants who, to our knowledge, have no interests. They don't have experiences of the world.
What is your favourite houseplant?
My favourite houseplant? Well, it keeps changing because I keep killing them all. But I've got one behind me, a yucca, That's been doing okay for a while, but it does look a little bit droopy. But yeah, it's a constantly changing favourite house plant because I keep finding a way to kill them. I think I've got one behind me there. I think it's called a Swiss cheese plant or something like that. I think that's probably not its actual name, but that's what it's sometimes referred to. That's gone on for a little while. Cactuses I can keep alive, cacti. So maybe then, because I have to do pretty much nothing with them.
If you created a vegan ice cream, what flavour would it be? And what wild name would you give it?
Oh, I'm really rubbish at coming up with names and stuff like that. I would probably pick. I mean, I used to like mint choc chip before, and I would probably call it something really exciting, like vegan mint choc chip, I reckon.
What is your favourite activism?
My favourite form of activism? Well, that depends. My favourite form of activism to do. I have enjoyed the slightly more disruptive stuff I've done, but I do find it stresses me out quite a lot before I do it. But in the moment, it's normally quite exciting. I think maybe making a bit of noise outside someone's venue is my favourite to do. In terms of my favourite, as in most effective, I don't really know. I think they all have awful kind of different forms of activism, seem to have their own pros and cons and reach different people. But yeah, I do like making a bit of noise outside of whatever or whoever it is we're targeting. I think that tends to be quite fun.
Trees or flowers?
Ooh, trees, I think. Maybe I don't know if that's the popular or unpopular answer, but probably trees. I grew up with a massive oak tree in my garden, which I always loved having around. And yeah, I think they're particularly oak trees that, they might have been around for 700 years, 900, up to, more than 1,000, some of them. And each one of them is its own huge ecosystem for all of the animals living on it, which I think is quite amazing to think about. Yeah, and just to think how long that tree predates us, how many people as that tree had wander past it in its time, I think. So yeah, I'll probably pick trees over flowers.
How many times have you been stranded on a desert island this year?
Well, it has happened. I was thinking vegan island, radio, and it does seem to happen all the time. Vegans are always getting stuck on desert islands and not knowing, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to eat meat. Luckily, I might be one of the few vegans who hasn't ended up on a desert island yet this year. Maybe a couple of hypothetical desert islands I've been told I might be on. But I've not found myself stranded yet, so I've done okay.
Have you ever stolen anything?
Oh no, I'm gonna never intentionally. Sometimes I've wandered out of a shop not realizing it. So I don't know, I've picked up 2 newspapers and thought I'd only grab one. But no, though when I realise, I've wandered off with this, I do tend to think like result, rather than, I've got to go back and give it back to them. So normally I'm not too worried about it if I have accidentally wandered off with something additional.
That is the end of your questions. Thank you, Reuben.
Thank you, Art. Wunderbar. All done. Or with zero context. You could do.